Hey there everybody, it's Nathan Cool with nathancoolphoto.com, and in this episode I want to talk about free alternatives to Lightroom, and I'm talking about free. If you Google free alternatives to Lightroom, you're going to get a whole lot of hits from software manufacturers that will give you a 30-day free trial. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about absolutely 100% free. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, well, an Adobe subscription isn't that much money for Photoshop and Lightroom, and it isn't, and I have that, but I also use, as you may know from other videos, in parts of my workflow, free alternatives to Lightroom, because in some cases they can be more accurate, sometimes they can be faster, and also sometimes they can do the entire job for you. So depending on where you might want to fit this into your workflow, whether it's just to do all your editing, or it's just to fit it into a certain part, I want to cover the ones that I recommend 100%, once again, absolutely free. What I'm going to be doing here is covering a variety of different programs. I'm going to then show just some of the high-level features of it. I'm going to go through some of the comparisons of them. I want to keep this video concise so I don't bore you too much, but if you want to see more detail that I didn't cover in this video for any of these programs, leave me a comment so that I can put that on my to-do list and I can dig into that further. A lot of these programs have the same things in common. In fact, Adobe's Lightroom is nothing more than just a raw interpreter built on top of a shell, also put into Adobe Camera Raw into Photoshop. But it does excel in some areas more than others. It has shortcomings compared to others. We're going to be able to see that in this video. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking some popular free ones, which includes Darktable, it includes RawTherapee. I'm going to be using OEM software for Canon, Nikon, and Sony, and I'm going to show you how these all compare. Some of these have great tools in them. Some can do a better job at decoding a raw file, and then some can do just a phenomenal job when it comes to editing. So I want to cover all that. So once again though, OEM software, if you're not familiar with that, that's something that comes free with your camera. So if you bought a Nikon, Canon, Sony, Olympus, whatever the camera is that you bought, you have already free software. You may not have realized it. Back in the day before the internet, it used to come on a CD and we'd put that in for software, but now you can download it from your camera maker's website. So I'm going to be covering the three popular ones, Nikon, Canon, and Sony, with that. I talk about a few of these other ones throughout my Mastering Color in Photography book, but here we'll be able to see a lot of what you can do with that OEM software compared to a couple free alternatives. You might recall also a free alternative that I showed when I put this into the workflow a few videos back. I'll have a link to that in the description for the video, which was the free Flambient. How to use, for instance, GIMP with OEM software to be able to do the entire process for the workflow for real estate photography using Flambient blending with darken mode window pulls. Here, I'm going to take it broader. I'm going to show different stuff, going outside, for instance, and showing some other things, as well as a small comparison inside of real estate photography. Now, OEM software overall, sometimes, yeah, it's free. You might not get the best tools out of it. You'd be surprised though what some of these will have that I'm going to be showing. But the one thing is it will always decode your raw file to the same way that you see it on the back screen of your camera. I'm going to be getting into a little bit more of that when we talk about what a raw file is. Just a real quick primer before we delve into that. Promise I'll keep it to 60 seconds or less. But basically that's why you'd want to, in many cases, use your OEM software. It is one of the best tools for the job. For doing that, it's not always the best tool for the job for your workflow. Sometimes it can be cumbersome. It doesn't have all the right tools that you need. We're going to see that also in this video. So sometimes OEM software is fantastic for it. It's something though, if you want really accurate color, if you want to master color in photography, something that I talk about in my book, Mastering Color in Photography, you're going to want to be at least familiar with your OEM software. So we're going to touch on that here as well. And by the way, if you haven't seen my book, Mastering Color in Photography, link to that also in the description for this video. You can download the ebook right away, start working through it if you want. Otherwise, just browse through the look inside section. You'll see it covers a whole lot of topics on mastering color. Moreover though, when you really think about it, How much editing do you need to do to a photo? Now, if we're talking about real estate photography or something that has multiple layers to it, yes, there's an entire workflow where you're gonna need something with a lot of capability. That goes beyond Lightroom anyways. That's where we're talking about, well, you might have to use Photoshop or GIMP as a free alternative to that, or some other software that might be less expensive that has some layer capability to it. So when you're talking about just standard photos that you might be doing for landscape photography that might have just one image, you don't necessarily need a lot of layers, and also portraits that you're doing of family stuff, outings, travel, street photography, stuff like that that you're doing might just be one shot. Let's edit it, let's get it out. Well, do you really need to have an Adobe subscription that costs you $120 a year? And of course, there's the raw to TIFF portion of a workflow that you may want to do where, yeah, you don't want to trust the demosaicing, the decoding of the raw file to maybe an Adobe product or to Affinity or something like that, or Capture One, but you feel comfortable with what you're working with in camera because of some of the proprietary information held in the raw file. So you may want to, and I do this in many cases, in some of my other videos, use OEM software to convert to a TIFF, and then I load that into Adobe software because of all the features, and allows me to then actually make a profit being able to have a fast enough workflow using some of the Adobe software. So having the best of both worlds is great. If you used, for instance, OEM software, convert your RAWs to TIFF, you get accurate colors, then you put those TIFFs into software that is more adept at a better workflow and has a lot more tools to it. But you also have to think about the sustainability of software. So OEM software is always going to be there. As long as you can buy a Nikon camera, or you can buy a Sony camera, or you can buy an Olympus camera, or whatever it is, Canon, doesn't matter, Fuji, if they build cameras, they also build software that goes along with it that can decode their raw files. Adobe's 800-pound gorilla in the marketplace. They'll probably always be around, but when you take a look at Darktable or RawTherapee or some of these others that are kind of floating out there in the photographic ether, well, who knows how long they'll be there, and most importantly, and here's a key, is that what will they support? So doing some of my testing here on this, I used Sony RAW files from a couple different cameras. One was a Sony a7 III, another one was from the brand new Sony Alpha 1. Thank you, my brother Dan, for investing in that gear so that we can get some of that footage. But the free stuff from like RawTherapee and Darktable couldn't support it. So in fact, Darktable would crash. I'll show you that. So it makes you wonder, well, okay, if I'm going to be doing this for a while, who can I rely on? When is RawTherapee or when is Darktable going to have support for the Sony Alpha 1, the A1? Well, right now, Lightroom does immediately, and of course, the Sony OEM software does too. So something to really consider when you're going into this free stuff that's out there. So next, I want to be able to dive in, show you the comparisons, show you the software itself. But before I do, just real quick, just to clarify on RAW files, what we're seeing, a lot of times this is a point of confusion. Inside every RAW file is a JPEG. Doesn't matter if you're shooting RAW plus JPEG or just RAW, there will be a JPEG in there, and that is used for previews. And most importantly, it's used for the preview that you see on the back screen of your camera. So when you take a picture, you see what you're looking at. Hey, I just took this picture. If you want it to look the exact same way when you bring it into post-processing, into software, the only way that is 100% guaranteed to see it that way is to use your OEM software. And the reason being is that there are two primary things inside of that RAW file that are proprietary and nobody else will see it. It's known as your lighting optimizer. For instance, in Nikon, it's known as active D-lighting. DPP also has this, and Canon has it, and Sony. All of them have lighting optimizers. The other is their color profile, and like landscape, vivid, things like that. Now, you might think to yourself, well, those are just things that you can adjust in post-processing software. Wrong, because the fact is these proprietary items that are inside the RAW file allow the OEM software to apply this during their demosaicing and other raw decoding processes, where the third-party software has to do it post facto. So it has to do this after it already does the RAW file decoding. So that's why you will never see 100% the exact same colors. We're going to get into that. I'm going to show you the examples of that, but sometimes that doesn't always matter. Sometimes you get close enough, and sometimes you can get better results if you then apply your own presets or adjustments to your RAW file. So I'll show some examples of that. In fact, stay tuned because I'm going to take one very difficult image and I'm going to edit that, and we're going to see how some software does a better job and all that it took using a few of these programs. So without further ado, let's start diving into comparing these programs. So we'll start here looking at Darktable because this will be very short and sweet. This is not my recommendation. You can see up here, it looks a lot like just about any other editing software you'd have. You'd take a picture here, you'd open it up in their Lighttable, which then shows the grid. This would be like your library module inside of Lightroom. But like Lightroom, but yet more confusing, you have to add things to the library and you have to like basically do this import. It was a little bit clunky. And yeah, I imported some stuff here and I could go around and select those. And then if I liked something, what I would do is I'd go either double click on it or click on Darkroom. And after a while it loads and you can see it's kind of a flat looking thing. Inside of here then there's all kinds of options to do colorizing and contrast, color corrections, levels, tones, all that type of stuff is here, just like you would have in other editing software. Let's go over here though to Lighttable. Let me show you some bad examples here though, just real quick. If we go back over here to the Sony pictures, this is one that we're going to be taking a closer look at in just a little bit. And when we load it up here into Darktable, that's how it decoded the RAW file. Great job, Darktable. Not a very good job. Now, somebody's going to complain, oh, in Darktable, all you got to do is this, this, and this. The idea behind this first comparison is just to show how they are loaded. How well did this software decode the RAW file? It did a horrible job. We go back over here to the Lighttable module and we can see, well, it looks okay, but as soon as we go into Darkroom, then of course it's just awful. So this is not my recommendation, so we can just close that off. The next one that I want to talk about is then the RawTherapee. Now, RawTherapee, bring it back up here. RawTherapee is something I really enjoyed. This is something that is very easy to use. This was an edited file I did here, thanks to my brother Dan once again. He took these also with a Canon some time ago. But what it first has a file browser module and there's no importing. You just go over here, you navigate to where your files are, and then you just click on it and boom, they're there. I go over here to these beach shots that we're going to be going through in a little bit, and then of course over here to like the Canon stuff, and I just thought that was fantastic. So you can take that then once you're happy with looking at, hey, I want to edit this photo. Well, you select one of those photos and you can double click on it or go over here to the editor, click on that, and there's the editor. Now, it brought up the last picture I edited instead of the one I had selected. Welcome to using free software. So I just double click on this other one and it decoded the RAW file. Now, RawTherapee has an abundance of tools and it would take forever to show them all. You can see though over here there's different tabs up at the top, way over here. See there's different ones for doing different stuff. This exposure tab has some amazing stuff. If you want to apply something, you would have to click this little doodad over here next to each one, and when you do that it has it turned on, and from there then you could make some adjustments like here, oh I want to bring the highlights down, I'd move that slider. But if I didn't have that turned on, then moving that slider doesn't do anything. Very confusing right off the bat. But once you get used to a few small nits like that, it's easy to get over. A lot of stuff though in here. They even have one thing I really liked when we get into this details tab. Is when we get into details, they had the ability to do also some hazing, so some dehaze stuff. Really liked that. Color has a whole lot of stuff that you can choose from, so the color tab, very useful on what they have. Geometries over there too. If you want to save any presets, then you would save a processing file, and that would be just a matter of clicking or right-clicking on here, processing file operations, and then you can save those, and then you can then apply those, and then you can save it as well. Some of the save though that's done, you have to go way up here to the top, and you'd have to say save current profile. So anyways, that, and then of course you can apply it. So it does have that ability. Moving on then to Nikon's OEM software. This is NX Studio. I do prefer Capture NXD because NX Studio is just a little bit laggy, but this is their new software and it's what they're going to be using. And by the way, links to all this is down in the description for the video as well. Now, it takes a pretty good job at at decoding a RAW file and gives you a whole lot of options to edit. You can see I took this one here and the different edits that I did to it with some contrast, some saturation, highlight protection. All that stuff is pretty simple to do. A lot of tools that they have available. They also have like a touch-up brush, and that's how I was able to then remove this little trash can out of there. So pretty good tools. Once again, it also has the ability to save and load adjustments. It's from the adjustment menu where you can save all adjustments, and then you can load those adjustments. So kind of like presets that you'd have in Lightroom. RawTherapee, once again, had similar features as well. Okay, so let's move on to the Sony software. Sony has this module called Imaging Edge Desktop, and in here it allows you to load 3 other modules. The first one is their viewer. If you click on that, here's a viewer. Thank you, Dan, for this beautiful picture out of his Sony Alpha 1. Now, when you want to edit something inside of here, you would have to right click on it and say open with edit. That opens the edit module and it opens it there. And then there's some adjustments here for your typical stuff. You got brightness, you got white balance, you see a histogram up here. Other things that they have here as well, color correction, some of this with the contrast and whatnot. And similar to other OEM software, here's for instance the creative look. This would be their different profiles. And then they also have, I don't want to do that, thank you. The D-range optimizer down here. So this D-range optimizer, that's the lighting optimizer that's inside of Sony cameras. And then when you're over at Nikon Studio, by the way, that would be known as active D-lighting. That's what's over here. So anyways, going back over here to Sony's software, they also have the ability to keep these adjustments. So you have to though go up to the edit and then it's image processing settings for save or load and apply settings. So those are right there. So you have that ability in their menu as well. Moving over to Canon software, Canon uses DPP. This is a unique layout. I like the idea, like the other OEM software, that you don't have to import files. You just navigate to where they are. And so I can go over here. And by the way, here's just a picture of my brother Dan. We can go to, when we like a picture, when we want to edit it, you have to select edit image. So we go over there and yeah, every time we find a sign with a cool something on it, we get a kick out of it. So anyways, you can edit it and you can see all the different adjustments that you have over here, all the things you could do with highlight, shadow, all that stuff is just right over here. So you can do whatever you'd like with it. You just return to then the, what would be a library type of module, if you were comparing this to Lightroom, and you would select another image and then go to edit image. This also has the ability to save and load, kind of like presets. These are known as recipes. And so you'd have to go up to the edit menu and then you have different things for recipes where you could save recipe in a file, which is saving all those adjustments that you have. And then you could select and copy recipes. You can read and paste from a file. So you can do all that from here as well. So now we're doing some comparisons on the RAW file interpretation itself. And the idea here is that you take a RAW file, put it into the software, export it as a TIFF, what do you have? So first one are those Nikon beach shots. So no editing was done whatsoever. You can see this is how NX Studio did a job. Lightroom, yeah, it really started blowing out a lot of the highlights, but a lot of that stuff could be corrected later. RawTherapee looks very similar, and the reason being is that RawTherapee will use DCP profiles. That stands for Adobe's DNG color profiles. So Adobe has free stuff out there available to the community, and that's what was put into RawTherapee for some of its decoding. Doesn't use it all the time. In fact, RawTherapee has a very unique way of, if it can't interpret correctly some things, it will compare the tonal curve on the embedded JPEG in the RAW file and start mimicking that. So RawTherapee does a pretty good job at it. Darktable, once again, just a horrific job in just straight out of, without doing any further editing, just how it loaded that in there. So did not like that at all. Do another comparison here of Nikon using NX Studio, and this is just a flashed shot that would go into the flash ambient blending later. It's just one shot of many for this particular shot, but it shows what would happen in trying to decode some of these colors. In fact, if you take a close look over here, you would see that I am holding a flash. That was me putting together this composite. It's one of flash of probably, I don't know, about 4 or 5 that were put together, plus ambient. Anyways, off topic here, the idea is to show color. You can see that NX Studio did a good job. These were the accurate colors, just like I saw them on the back screen, which we'd expect out of OEM software. Lightroom darkened it up a bit. The colors aren't too bad, but it is not entirely accurate. RawTherapee looks exactly the same once again as Lightroom, as once again using those DCP profiles, the Adobe DNG profiles. Darktable, forget it, it's just awful. Let's move on to Canon. We can see then using Canon's DPP software compared to the rest of it. The DPP software is the Digital Photo Professional. And this is just once again, it's that free software by Canon. Did a pretty good job decoding the raw file. All these look a little flat, don't worry about it. I'm going to show some better comparisons once they were edited, but you can see out of camera what the comparison looks like. Lightroom really darkened up a lot of that, richened it up too much. RawTherapee really, in this case, did a better job of decoding that raw file, gave us a lot more flexibility. So looking pretty good. Darktable, that just was too dark. It did get similar to Lightroom type results, but where it wasn't dark, it was really flat. So once again, not a fan of Darktable. And looking at then Sony, this particular shot, we can see this was overlooking the beaches in the background, lagoons in the foreground. We can see how Imaging Edge, which is the OEM software for Sony, did a pretty good job of decoding that raw file. Needs some editing done on it. I'm going to show comparisons of that also. But you can see the difference when we go over to Lightroom, we can see how the sky is bluer with less reddish hue into it. So even though this was getting close to sunset, the sky in Lightroom is looking a little more daytime-like. Didn't do anything on the settings. Once again, loading the raw file in, exporting to TIFF. RawTherapee looks about the same as Imaging Edge in that it preserved that reddish hue. And once again, RawTherapee, even though at times it will use the Adobe DNG color profiles, it does try to mimic the tonal curve coming out of the embedded JPEG in the raw file, so it can apply that when it's decoding the raw file. Darktable did a horrific job, definitely not on my recommended list. Now let's take a look at some of the edits. Okay, so let's take this Nikon beach shot. This was the raw file, and it does look a little flat, so we definitely need to pump it up, rotate it a little bit. So if we were just to do some straight conversions out of this, we'll do just some simple sliders. So I'm going to show some editing on one particular very difficult file to show a worst case scenario coming up. Let's first take a look at what Lightroom looked at. That was pretty good. I was able to really richen up the sky. Of course, we got that vibrance adjustment in Lightroom, so I was able to get a pretty rich picture out of that. If I bring it over just to NX Studio, well, that's not so bad. So NX Studio is able to richen that up as well and get a little bit more accuracy in the colors and the shadows and whatnot. Once again, just using simple sliders. I'm not using tonal curve, all that fancier stuff. If I bring it into RawTherapee, well, that looks pretty good as well. I'm able to get some really good results very quickly just using RawTherapee, using some of their sliders. Once again, it takes a little while to get used to using RawTherapee, but once you do, those, just even the simple sliders that they have can do a fantastic job. Let's move on to Canon. So if we take a look at Canon, and just the TIFF that came right out of the raw file, it's a little flat. It's a really cool looking cloud that Dan captured. So, but it is flat. So let's pump it up a little bit. So if we take it into Lightroom, obviously there's a whole lot we can do with vibrance. The highlights were really hard, just using simple sliders to get a handle on. Now, once again, we could use gradients and brushes and stuff, but this is just simple sliders. So we don't have any special tools. Just what could we we do to futz with stuff just real quick. So, but really not bad, except those highlights are pretty heavy. Going over to DPP, their own software, we get some really good results out of that just using some simple sliders. So very impactful image. But if we take it over then into RawTherapee, I really loved the results that came out of RawTherapee. Once again, just using simple sliders. I'm not talking about using tonal curves and all that yet, you know, using a curves layer or something. So I really liked that this captured a lot of different colors, a lot of impact out of it, a lot of vibrance as well. Now let's go to Sony, which was a little disappointing because imaging edge is not very rich. First off, let's just take a look. The raw file that we had coming out of Imaging Edge, it was okay, but it does have some very deep shadows. It's taken very late in the day, and it can be somewhat of a decent picture, you know, that if we edit it and bring it out. So let's take a look. If we bring it into Lightroom, there's a lot we can do with it, and it really didn't get grained from raising the shadows and doing some other adjustments, just the simple sliders. Highlights are a little blown out. Yeah, if we really reduce those much, I had a problem trying to keep it bright enough, but it still turned out pretty good when we just edited in Lightroom. If we take a look at it in RawTherapee, there's some good results there as well. I really liked this better than Lightroom. And once again, just using simple sliders and just trying to take no more than about 60 seconds just to futz with it. This is what I got then using RawTherapee. If I tried to use Imaging Edge to edit it, it just didn't work out. Nothing I did. I tried this probably 4 or 5 different times, and this is just the best I could do because it just doesn't have very many tools available. It has some saturation, but it doesn't have, for instance, vibrance or dehaze. So without having vibrance, you're unable to saturate only the muted colors, which is what vibrance does. So this just really didn't do a very good job. I really wasn't happy with it, but it was the best that I could do when it came to this. Now, next up, I want to be able to walk through editing a very difficult image to show how these programs would work. So here's a very difficult image that was shot. It's at a very high altitude. There was snow on the ground. It was late in the winter. Dan shot this here with a Sony a7 III, and we can see that it's a very underexposed picture, but it's easily recoverable. Once again, you might have seen videos I did on ISO invariance. These cameras, like the a7 III and newer cameras, most mirrorless, they're almost all ISO invariant. You can just shoot stuff like this and recover amazing stuff. So here we're going to do it. We're going to do almost the exact same thing over in RawTherapee, and then we're going to give it a best attempt over in Imaging Edge, the Sony software. So this will just be a Sony example, but just to show you this compared to RawTherapee, which I think you'll really like, let's up this exposure a couple stops. It's way too underexposed. So as we do that and we bring that up, let's bring that up to just about maybe 2.1. That looks good. So now we're starting to see some detail come in here, and we're not getting noise. Once again, this is pretty much an ISO invariant type camera. So you can really increase that quite a bit. Add just a touch of contrast maybe in there. But we want to bring up the shadows a little bit more so we can see more of that ground. Are we getting any noise yet? No, we're really not getting much in the way of noise, so really liking that. Now let's bring down those highlights in the sky, and we'll just bring down the highlights themselves. So that helped quite a bit already. If we bring it down too much, it's going to bring down highlights everywhere. Now we could put a gradient across the sky, that's fine, but once again, we'll just try to keep this very simple, one-to-one comparison. Let's add a little bit of clarity, and then let's add some dehaze in there, and when we do, we get a pretty powerful looking picture. We'll up the whites maybe just a little bit on that. We could up the exposure if we wanted to, maybe increase the shadows even more, and then let's add some vibrance, which will really add some punch to it. So playing around with that, that's not looking too bad. So once again, what we started with, and then what we finished with. Okay, now let's move on. You can see that was a very quick edit to get those type of results. Let's move over to RawTherapee. So I've loaded it into RawTherapee here, and the first thing we want to do is we want to change that exposure as well. So let's increase that exposure up here. We'll use this slider, and we'll get it up to about the same. It was about 2.1, 2.2, something like that. That's good. We can add a little bit of contrast like we did here, maybe a little bit of saturation, but the key is going to come in when we want to do the highlights and when we want to do the shadows. So we're going to be doing that down in this section here. So let's just scroll down to that. All right, so scrolling down here, I've got this turned on for shadows and highlights. And now that I've got that turned on, I'm gonna bring the highlight slider up, which is the same as taking it down in Lightroom. So the shadows, I'm gonna bring those shadows up so we can get some nice shadows going on. You can see this is working out really good. Well, and now the thing is, it's different. It's a very simple thing. They've got tone mapping inside here. So I love this idea of tone mapping. If we turn that on and activate it, look at that. It starts bringing out some tone mapping to it. Very unique. So that's looking very good. I'm loving the look of that. We can even go back up here and then decrease the highlights a little bit more to really richen up that sky. Already looking really good, but let's go over here and let's make a few more changes here. So when we're in this details tab, we can scroll down here, and all the way down near the bottom, they have a haze removal tool. I love the idea that they have this. So you can click on that, and now you can apply those dehazing algorithms. Now that's way too much, so we can back off on that and start playing around with that. Also, you can change the depth of the haze. So a lot more control here than what you would have over Lightroom. So we can change that even a little bit more. Now that we've got that going on, we may want to go back, change some of the tone mapping on that as well. And if we change some of that tone mapping, some of the strength, we can just do it right down here, then we get a more natural looking picture. So using RawTherapee, this is once again how we started with a raw file, and this is what we ended up with. Okay, now let's try to edit this over in the Imaging Edge software. And I laugh because I already know how this is going to look. So this is the image here, and let's open that in Edit. So we go over here, open with Edit. Now, there's not a whole lot I can do here, but we'll give it our best shot. So first thing is we want to up that exposure. I can only go up 2 stops. That's as much as I can do. That's the maximum they have, and they use a brightness instead of exposure. What I can do here is I could increase the shadows, so we'll do that. That'll help. I can bring down the highlights in the sky by doing that. I could play around with the D-range optimizer, but I already know that being on auto is good. By the way, if you didn't have the lighting optimizer on, you can see that's what it would look like. So that's how it would be brought into other software without knowing how to decode that. You can change that though yourself. Now I can add a little bit of saturation in here, but that's, you know, it's not much. It's not a whole lot that I'm going to be able to do. So now the next thing is I would have to really apply. If I only did it here, I'd have to apply a tonal curve. And so here I can do it in the tonal curve section. And for instance, I could raise the darks up here. I could lower some of the highlights in this section, and I could futz around with that and try to get something that's decently workable, but it's a lot more work. And by the way, this is a little slow on the refresh, so not the best. So yeah, you can futz around this. I really didn't like the results out of it, and the best I got using that Imaging Edge, we started with the raw file, and this is then what we ended up with. So as we can see, Darktable, forget it, it's not my recommendation, it's out. For the freebie ones that are non-OEM, that work for just about everyone, I do love RawTherapee. The results you can get out of that are phenomenal. There is a learning curve. There's a lot of tools in RawTherapee to use, but I'd recommend downloading it, giving it a try. It's just another arrow in your quiver, another tool in your box that you can use under certain circumstances, or it might be something to completely replace what you do for Lightroom. Above all else, no matter what other tools, software you do use, I always recommend having OEM software, whatever it is for your camera. If you're using Nikon, Capture NXD, or Nikon Studio, if you're using Canon DPP, if you're using Sony Imaging Edge. But once again, we can see that Imaging Edge, it's great if you're doing just raw to TIFF conversion, but really to edit stuff, it lacks a lot of oomph to it. It just doesn't have very good tools, and what tools it does have, they're very limited, not a lot really to work with. So you might want to think about just using that for your raw to TIFF conversion, or picking other software that does a better job. If you're seeing a problem, for instance, using your Sony RAW files in Lightroom, think about using a different treatment profile that's more camera matching. I have videos on that, and I talk about it in the book also, but you can see the link for videos on those treatment profiles in the description for this video as well. Anyways, I hope this video is useful for you and that you can use some of this in your photography as well. If you did like this video and you want to see more, you can subscribe. to my YouTube channel. It doesn't cost anything. And as soon as one of these videos is posted, you'll be the first to know. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, take care, be safe, and get out there and shoot something.